This is UltraCycling Magazine, formerly known as the Ohio Ram Show.
Watching the UltraCycling Magazine show, the show about everything ultracycling, everything bicycle related, just bicycles in general. Hey Lee, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm having a little trouble with throat again tonight, but that seems to be part of the season. So yeah, well, we're glad to welcome everybody here, and we want to remind you that we come here because of the wonderful people who won the time stations for the Race Across America here in Ohio. Time station 41 in Oxford, 42 in Blanchester, 43 in Chillicothe. And I saw we had some new friends sign up on Facebook and YouTube this week. And we would invite all of you to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Facebook. And if you subscribe on YouTube, what are we supposed to do, Jim?
Ring that bell. Let me hit that button.
Yeah.
I'm all out of sorts tonight. Sorry about that, guys.
I guess we said you just see how the giveaway goes based on how the show goes, right?
Exactly, but we'll be doing a mouse pad again tonight. And to do that, in the comments, hashtag UCM.
Hashtag UCM, and that puts you in running for one of our wonderful mice pads.
Mice pads, there you go.
I used to have people come in the store and they asked for mouses.
There you go.
I thought, where did this come from? I don't know. Anyhow, put up there about our website, ucm.bike.
Let me do that right now. There we go.
Because we want people to know that new URL. Like I said, it'll look similar to the old website, and we're getting it changed slow but sure over there. But then there'll be a whole new one someday, but not now. We just take one thing at a time. But
there you go.
UCM.bike. The reason why we want you to know about that is because that's where we have our show notes, and we're going to mention those here as we go along.
Definitely.
We have got some wonderful, wonderful reporters, Jim.
Yes, we do.
Just got a great one, and this week we have been busy with these people. We finished up with Race the Pearl in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Grinny Kartuk gave us a wonderful report there. If you go to the website, ucm.bike, and scroll down, you'll see the playlist. You can see her entire report there on the website. And the playlist, I forget how many there are. But also finishing up this week was Marek Rupinski from Poland, who was doing the Japanese Odyssey. He gave a nice report that is on the website, a playlist for that. And then we do have a trailer here for Todd Phuket in the Polar Roll.
Let me see if I can get that going.
Roll.
There we go.
Roll the Polar Roll.
My name's Todd Phuket. I am the director of adventure for the 906 Adventure Team, also the race director for the Polar Roll, which is our registration is going to be opening this weekend, Sunday at 9:06 a.m. The Polar Roll is, we've got a 15-mile option. We have a 30-mile option. You can bike or snowshoe. And we also have a 140-mile ultra event, which is originally kicked off last year. That was the first annual or the inaugural 140-mile ultra. Running it again this year. We increased the size of the field from 30 participants last year to 75 this year. Like I said, registration opens on Sunday. The 15 and the 30-mile event will be on February 17th, 2024. The ultra is on Monday, February 19th. You know, Polar Roll is unique in that I'm going to say the entirety of the 15 and 30-mile courses are machine groomed specifically for fat bikes. So we're incredibly fortunate in Marquette County to have two of probably the best winter grooming operations in the country. One is called Ramba, and the other is called NTN, or the No Cayman on Trail Network. And you literally will go out for 15 to 30 miles and just ride this white magic carpet ride. Everybody should do it. This is the way to experience winter riding. Nobody does it better than NTN and Ramba. Now, I'm not going to profess to be an expert on winter ultra events, but my understanding is that more often than not, they utilize snowmobile trails for the majority of the routes. What we've tried to do with this route is incorporate a lot of machine groom trail specifically for fat bikes. As of last year, when we kicked off this event, we were able to, I want to say it's about 60 to 65% of the route, the ultra route, is specific just to fat bikes. You're not going to see snowmobiles on it. You're not going to see anybody on it. Just fat bike traffic. And then the remainder of the course, the other 35 to 40%, will be some snowmobile trail, or it's in our community, it's called the Iron Ore Heritage Trail. It's a multi-use trail. There's going to be some snowmobile traffic on it. But it's literally, it incorporates some country roads that are abandoned. They're snow covered this time of year. Very little traffic. It's probably one of the most diverse, I would say, winter ultras you could sign up for. And I'm saying that based on the feedback from the 30 people who did it last year. They were blown away by it, and the event is already doubling in size.
And Jim, I looked at their registration this morning. He said they had 75 for this ultra.
Yes.
They had 65 registrants at about 10:30 this morning, and
Awesome.
they opened the registration at what, 9 a.m.?
Yep.
He said?
Yep.
So I don't know if there's any left or not there, but the website you can go look at it is thepolarroll.com. And I don't have a link to it in the show notes. I'm sorry, I didn't get that done. But it sounds like if you like it nice and cold and snowy, and
there you go, and have a
there
fat
you
bike.
go.
Exactly.
It kind of appeals to me in some way. I kind of like the winter, but anyhow,
there you go.
Now, we had the World Time Trial Championships this weekend.
Definitely a lot of good news coming out of there.
And we do have a playlist that's available there for the World Time Trials. We had Mary Savage, who was working with the Crawfords and the cruise bike people.
Yes.
And also Georgie Stoichev was giving us some reports. In fact, I still have one report to do. I just got waylaid this afternoon and didn't get that finished, but I'll hopefully get that in the playlist tomorrow. We'll be at the tail end of it, so you could see the others. But anyhow, it was a wonderful event, and I want to just go over some details here. Remember, these are all unofficial numbers at this point, and also subject to my error.
You don't make errors, Lee.
Oh, yes. Well, the top in the 24-hour race was Stanislav Verduskak from Slovenia, 4:23.2, and the top woman was our friend Isa Palver, who we've had on the show, from Switzerland, 4:51.2. I can't even read my own writing, Jim. And that is a record, as I understand it, in the 50-59 age category for women.
Wow. Excellent.
She beat her own record of 2022, I think it was it last year?
Yep. Great.
And then notable was Dorina Vaccaroni, who set a record for the 60-69 age category of 4:41.6. I believe Laura Crawford held that record. Now, some interesting things I noticed. Oh, we want to mention our friends.
Yes, definitely.
Semper Fi.
Yep. Joe and Doug.
Doug and Joe from here in Ohio. Doug Shivington and Joe Lawhorn. 440. I don't know what's wrong with me. 446.4 miles.
Yes, definitely.
We had a record in men 60 to 69, as I understand it. Peter Scher from Germany, 438.0.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is astounding. Harry Toms,
Mm-hmm.
under 20,
Yes.
333.6. That is a record. And the old record for under 20-year-old male was 270 miles.
Blew it away.
You talk
Wow.
about crushing.
Definitely.
And Mary got in touch with Harry's father
Mm-hmm.
about possibility of getting in touch with him for the show.
That would be
He
awesome.
said they're very, very shy,
Mm-hmm.
but they have our contact information.
Okay.
They know who we are and how to get hold of us, and we would love to have him on the show.
Oh, definitely.
With his father, of course, if he's a minor, we don't have minors on without their parents present.
Exactly. Yep.
And also in the 20-29 age group, we had a Jonathan Bush who did 14.4.
Wow.
And an Emmy Dominic who did 4.8. So we've been talking about younger riders.
You get more into the sport.
Had kind of a serendipity here.
Yep, definitely.
With Carol Bellevue and Laura Crawford both came at us at the same time saying, hey, we're running into these younger people. We think you ought to have them on the show.
Yep.
And I think we ought to do something about that, Jim.
I totally agree. We need to get more younger people into the sport.
Create some kind of, I thought about, getting a seasoned rider on together with us, one of these younger people. And have
definitely.
A nice conversation between them. And a lot of nice things happening there. I don't know if anybody else out there has any news from the World Time Trials and any corrections or so forth. Why, don't hesitate to post them. We'll
definitely.
Do them.
Yeah, but our friends at Steel Bike and Infinity Seats had a good showing again this year. So we want to congratulate
for the riders, I believe.
Yes, they did. I want to congratulate everybody that rode Spiegel and rode Infinity, definitely.
And that's a good thing. Anyhow, now next week we're going to have Alberto Blanco on. I don't have a slide for him.
Right.
We all know Alberto. He runs the Florida 500. We'll be talking about that. He's been on the show before a number of times, and he's quite a talker. We'll have a great time with Alberto.
Definitely. Yes.
And then this next week we're going to have the Deccan Cliffhanger in India, which is one of the last Ram qualifiers of the year, I believe.
I think you're correct.
And hopefully we'll get some coverage of that. I got some things in the work for that kind of thing.
Excellent.
You have anything, Jim?
No, you've basically covered it all. I've been swamped at work this week and haven't had enough time to play bike stuff.
Yeah, well, we got to get you out of this job stuff. I mean,
I tell you, I know.
It's in the road of doing
but
this.
But it's one of those catch-22 things. Either you work and have money for bike stuff, or you don't work and don't have money for bike stuff. So.
That's understandable. Unless you can do it like, well, we won't get into that.
There you go.
Well, let's go down to Mexico City.
All right, let me flip the button.
See if you can find Allan Shaw.
There's Allan.
Hello, good evening.
How are you tonight?
I'm a little bit tired. I finished a very big bike race 2.5 hours ago.
Amazing. How far did you ride tonight or today?
The time, in about 3 hours, I made it about 90 kilometers, about 50, 60 miles.
That's
and it was
great.
on a very tight, closed course with a lot of complicated obstacles. So it was like a very strong effort to put out the averages. And
there you go.
Didn't quite get the result I wanted, but I was very happy with the performance overall.
Great job. Excellent. Lee?
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I got a couple of questions, and if you saw the title slide, you probably know part of them. We've heard about the Silk Road Mountain Race, and it sounds like an endurance event. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the Silk Road Mountain Race is in its, I want to say 5th year. COVID kind of confuses things a bit, but I want to say 5th year. So it's a race in Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia, which is sort of on the high plateau of the Chechen Mountains, which run sort of through where the Pamir Highway is in Tajikistan, and all of this is very high altitude and very sort of sparsely populated. There's a very low population in Kyrgyzstan, and almost half of them live in the capital city. So as soon as you move outside of the capital, it's impressively empty. And the race is about 1,000. I'm going to do everything in metric. I'm sorry, guys.
Don't
It's
worry.
about 1,800 kilometers, so maybe 1,200
Right.
miles.
Excellent.
And it's the true format of ultra in that there are three checkpoints. There's a fixed route, but there is no stages. So you just go until you're done. And it's kind of famed for very challenging terrain. It is kind of mostly like I've raced it before on a gravel bike, but it's kind of pegged itself now as a mountain bike race because you will ultimately be a lot more comfortable on a mountain bike because it's really rough in many places.
Wow.
It's also famed for having a lot of hiker bikes. There's lots of sections that you have to walk because it's just not rideable. But I think a lot of what you discover about this race is that the hiker bike is not about making you suffer. It's that you can connect to very, very remote and incredibly beautiful places, but the only way to connect them is like this kind of not very nice pass that isn't very rideable kind of thing. So it's extremely spectacular, pretty much consistently throughout. And then it's also just got this lovely vibe of uniqueness, like
Wow.
when would you find yourself in a country like Kyrgyzstan? It's a country that most people can't spell or pronounce or point
Right.
out on a map, right? And it feels like this really amazing, well-kept secret in bikepacking because it is so stunningly beautiful. And in many ways, it's just unspoiled by so much sort of like oversubscription of the outdoors and nature, right? Like depending on where you are in the world, like some of the really beautiful natural hotspots can be kind of full of people nowadays. Whereas this is just so empty, and it's like it's a really unique experience.
Wow.
Really, I think because for me, when I first did Silk Road the first time, it was my first ultra. I'd never raced ultra before, and I went in on an 1,800-kilometer Kyrgyzstan adventure because I'm very kind of adventure led, and I knew I was jumping in the deep end, but I wanted this unique experience, and I found myself recommending it to people all the time, even if they have no experience. It's like, even if you don't win, you're just going to have such an amazingly memorable time because you can't not in such a unique place,
Excellent.
So how many times have you done it, Allan?
It's my second time. It was my second time this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of altitudes do you encounter on this route?
I'm pretty sure. Oh no, metrics.
Hey, that's all right.
I'm pretty sure
Although
that
we're
the top
Americans,
altitudes,
we've
but
been
you're worldly people.
we've been forced to learn metrics.
Yeah. And none of us bothered to learn Imperial. I mean, I'm from the UK, so I did grow up with Imperial, but I've lived outside of the UK for 12 years. And as soon as I got onto metric, I was like, wow, this is a lot easier.
There you go.
But I think my top altitude is it's a few times you cross over the 4,000-meter mark. So you're talking like between 13 and 14,000 feet is kind of where you land. And you'll do that a couple of times. But over the course of the whole race, it's 30,000 meters of climbing.
Wow.
So it's pretty close to 100,000 feet, like 90 something,
That's amazing.
And what kind of what time of year does this happen?
It happened in August of this year, and as
what
it is
kind
a
of weather
north.
what's your weather temperature
I mean,
range from high to low?
Yeah, it's very extreme, guys. It's but there's also a lot of like luck of the draw, because on such a long course, the people at the front and the people at the back have many days in between, and because you're in these mountain areas, like the weather changes pretty quickly. So there were people who experienced snow this year. I didn't get any snow this year. And mostly it was relatively dry. I also didn't get so much rain. But the temperatures would have gone from a low of maybe -7 Celsius up to, I think, maybe the hottest might have been pushing on 30 degrees Celsius,
wow.
which was actually less extreme than last time. Like my lowest temperature last time was -17, but again, it's luck of the draw because it was -17 because by the time I got to like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, I was over 3,000 meters and I had to go over a mountain pass. And I was like, well, you're sleeping at altitude, so it's going to get really cold.
There you go.
But there's and the thing is about this kind of race is because it's so remote, the race director, Nelson Trees, provides like a very, very comprehensive road book. Because you're really out there by yourself. So that sometimes it can feel as much about your survival skills as it is about your cycling skills. You know, like you got to be able to look after yourself.
Yep.
And you've got to be really aware of how little services there are around, and how far those services might be, you know, like many, many hours. So part of the mandatory kit list, because there's a bunch of things on the mandatory kit list, and one of them is a sleeping bag, which is graded to at least minus 10 or 15.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that night when I slept at minus 17, I had a minus 18 sleeping bag. So I slept like a baby, and it was only a problem getting up in the morning, and I had to just put on like all the clothes I brought with me and just see how it went, you know?
Wow.
So, when you talk about services being sparse, what are we talking about? Are there villages? Are there, and how far apart might they be?
It's pretty far, guys. Like I think on the course, outside of one checkpoint, and the checkpoint did have food, like hot food available, but you can't necessarily pack that hot food to take with you. There's a section with a checkpoint in it where you didn't go through anywhere that had anything for maybe 220 miles.
Wow.
And you're very much in the nothing. Like there is nothing, and there is no one. And I think there's a couple of other stretches which push over 100 kilometers into 150 kilometers. It's pretty common. And there you get a list of resupply points, and it is true that there was a few places that I discovered that weren't on the resupply list, which was a nice surprise. But you have to pack and supply yourself with potentially a few days in mind.
Okay.
And I will say that, like, yeah, the resupply points tend to be villages. There can be bigger towns, but as I said, like it's a very sparse population. And it is true to say, unfortunately, that the resupply options are not great. Like you can sometimes ride for 2 or 3 days through the wilderness, and you get to the shop, and all they've got is like bread and Coca-Cola, and you're like, okay, I guess we're doing bread and Coca-Cola because there's nothing else. And it makes me think about last year I did the Tour Divide race from Banff to Antelope Wells. And resupply in America is just such a joy. Like you will spend a lot of money. You will spend that money because gas station prices are not like, supermarket prices.
Exactly.
But the level of options and the amount of sustenance that you can get in all forms, both salty and sweet, is just so far apart from what you get in Kyrgyzstan. It's also very common in Kyrgyzstan that you get sick of the stomach, and also that you lose a lot of weight because it's just not. There's just not necessarily the calories there to replace the amount of effort that you're putting into the ride. So it's kind of a fun little pre-game to see if you can put on a bit of weight, because you're probably going to lose it. So it's nice to be a little bit heavier when you start.
There you go. How much weight did you lose during this time?
This year, I lost between 5 and 6 kilos in like 12 days. Yeah.
Amazing.
And I lost a little bit more last time.
Do you do mainly a liquid diet that you carry with you, or do you kind of mix it up?
No, I mean, again, like you're just so struggling for options, right? Yep. So you just, at the beginning, what I normally have is I have like quite a lot of protein bars.
Okay.
Like maybe 12 or 16, but they're very much kept as my emergency food stash, because you never know if you have a mechanical issue or something happens and you're not able to make it to the place that you imagined with food. You need to have a backup. So I still had a few protein bars when I finished, and then outside of that, you try and get a good resupply in the beginning. But yeah, I mean, I brought a stove and I did do a lot of ramen noodles, because ramen noodles is like that one thing that is pretty common in the shops that otherwise only have bread and nothing.
Yep.
So it's good to get a hot meal in you and some dense carbs when you go for your 3-hour sleep or whatever. So I tend to go for like ramen noodles, chocolate bars, and the bread will do. And then there's some funny localisms. Like they have like kind of a mildly fermented yak milk, which is surprisingly okay on bread. It's kind of like cheese. It's kind of like cheese,
Yes, Allan, I've never done anything quite as remote as you have, but I've done some. And I found that no matter how dismal your place is where you're going to spend the night or what have you, and you kind of get a state of depression, you get a stove going, you get some hot soup, and it changes your whole attitude.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
a
I
it's an
completely agree.
emotional,
Yeah.
emotion changing kind of thing.
And we all kind of obsessed about the clock, but I honestly think that it doesn't, for the benefit it gives you, it doesn't actually take that long.
And
Tent up,
I
in the tent,
support your
boil some
idea.
water, on you go.
Yeah, I
Like,
support your idea of having an emergency. I always carried an emergency food supply
yeah,
that I would not touch
yeah.
unless
Yeah.
I got into trouble.
What's cool is for me, I just open the box and then just dump it all in my frame bag, and they're all kind of at the bottom of the frame bag. So I don't really notice that they're there, but I know that they are there if I need them. So it doesn't feel like I'm carrying a big weight necessarily, and it's just kind of passively doing its thing over there and just being a good backup plan, you know?
Gotcha. Now, being out in the wilderness and away from everybody, do you run into any wild animals, or have you, or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that Kyrgyzstan it's not a big wild animal place in terms of like, I mean, when I did Tour Divide last year, I ran into a few bears and I ran into a few, I ran into one moose. And whereas in Kyrgyzstan, you're talking like there's, is it called a marmot or something like this? Is like this funny little beaver type animal.
Marmot.
Loads of those.
We have
loads of those. They're so cute. They make a very funny noise.
Yeah, they whistle. They call them whistle pigs.
Whistle pigs. Okay, I never heard that. They got a bunch of birds of prey, some big birds of prey that you get to watch in the sky. But I wouldn't say like compared to what I'm used to, like which is like loads of deers or dogs chasing you or whatever here in Mexico.
Yeah.
There wasn't like an excessive amount of wildlife. It's quite barren. But what's really nice about Kyrgyzstan as a country, because this year I managed to talk to quite a few people who'd ridden in Tajikistan, and I think that for people in this part of the world, a lot of us think about the Pamir Highway as this like very big box to check, like this high altitude, crazy out there sort of place. But I heard from quite a lot of people who went to Tajikistan before that Kyrgyzstan is nicer. And the reason that Kyrgyzstan is nicer is because it exists at a multitude of different altitudes. So it means it has very diverse nature. Like you do have the very rocky and barren, like super high alpine, but then you also have like pinewood forests and like beautiful lakes and things like this. So there's quite a lot of diversity to the view over the course of the race, and it's very well designed. It's very well designed course. You know,
traffic on the tracks you were on. Did you encounter any traffic?
Well, no, not really. I mean, it's kind of interesting to think about. Like, there's a few sections, where you would encounter a bit of traffic, but it's pretty light and it's all very rural, so it's moving pretty slowly.
Gotcha.
You go through a lot of random yurt camps because in the rural areas of Kyrgyzstan, a lot of people are still living this sort of nomadic lifestyle. So they have their yurt camp and their cattle. And then once the cattle have eaten all the grass, then you got to pack up the yurt and you got to go down the road and you got to set up somewhere else. And people still live this way. So you do encounter quite a lot of very friendly and random people around. It's normally a bit of an exercise to not accept invitations because it can be very hard. You can lose a lot of time sitting in people's yurts.
I want to get to my other question, Jim.
Okay.
Why a cargo bike? I guess that's the name for it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a cargo bike. Loads of reasons. Hey, like what I've been thinking about when people ask me this question now is I have lots of reasons. I think it's a great idea, but they tend to fall into two different categories. One category is the bike itself, which is that it's a very capable bike. If you get a chance to have a go on an Omnium cargo bike, compared to a lot of other models of cargo bike, it doesn't have a super excessive wheelbase. Like the wheels are not that far apart compared to other cargo bikes.
Gotcha.
It's also not particularly heavy. And as a riding experience and a handling experience, it really does ride like a regular bike. Like it's very common that you get on a cargo bike for the first time and you got to do a bunch of laps of the block and test the steering and be like, oh, this is funny. most people I know who ride who have a go on an Omnium, by the time you get to the end of the block, you've already got it, and it's just like, wow, this is just like a normal bike,
Gotcha.
and yet it is capable of everything. And in that sense, I think that it's a really. I would never advocate for a world where we are only allowed to own one bike. Like I love that I have 5 bikes and they are all really fun and beautiful.
Of course.
But if there was only one bike, for me, it would absolutely be the cargo bike because it can just
Now
do
the thing that impressed me, I
anything.
wish we had a photograph, and we didn't get one. With all the stuff going on this weekend, we just kind of didn't get everything done. But anyhow, the pack you had on it seemed to be relatively flat.
Yeah.
And the temptation when you have a bike like that, of course, is I've got room for more.
Ah, yeah. There's a big thing about that. I also think, like in general, I have been riding. Like I have worked for 10 years as a bicycle courier, and for the last 5, outside of my sort of fun time in Mexico City, I work as a cargo courier on the Omnium bike. So I ride that bike for 40 hours a week, every single week.
Wow.
So you're very, very familiar with it. And then it ends, and this is kind of like the part 2 of the why, is that we kind of have this big focus in cycling in general and ultra about like perfectionism, especially at an elite level in sport, where you need to have like the best of this and these kind of clothes and those kind of tires and that. Yep. And it kind of affects a general level of accessibility, I think, in the sport. And for bike messengers who are out there 40 hours a week doing their thing, like we basically live on our bikes.
Yep.
And we tend to have really funny bikes, like bikes where the setup works for us.
Right.
Spending the whole bloody day and the whole bloody week and the whole bloody month on it. So and then you realize that like there's a very symbiotic relationship going on between machine and rider, right? And if the rider and the machine work well together, you can ride any kind of bike. And I've kind of gotten to a point with Ultra where I believe that the sort of 3 cornerstones of Ultra are mental, physical, and mechanical, right? And it's kind of like that meme of like, fast, good parts, cheap, like pick 2, right? Yep. Like if you have 2 going for you and the third one can be a little bit lower, you know? So if you're really physically strong and you have a great attitude, the bike doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
And alternatively, if you're in amazing shape and you have an amazing bike, you can have a terrible attitude and you'll probably do pretty well.
Right. There you go.
And it is just in that balance. And I know myself that, I have a very good positive mental attitude.
Gotcha.
And the physical, you do as best you can. You'll always get, like, I do pretty well, but you could always do better. And you just accept where you are when you start.
Yep.
And honestly, I thought I had an amazing machine and it held up really, really well. Like our build weight was less than 16 kilos for a full cargo bike.
Yeah.
And then I had a very streamlined amount of stuff on it because I've done a bunch of ultra racing before. So I know what I really need and I didn't need to take more than that.
Didn't
and
overpack.
It was like a very tight setup.
Yeah.
And over the course of the whole race, I didn't even so much as put air in my tires. Like
wow.
I oiled the chain once a day because it was very dusty out there.
Yep.
But outside of that, I did not have one single mechanical issue with the bike. And I very much thrashed it,
Wow.
So in that sense, it's like, I thought all the way through that I questioned people's questioning of my bike choice because it's like, it isn't actually that bad an idea. Yeah, it's not that bad an idea. And it's more about the experience and the bike that you love to ride and ride the bike you love, not the bike that you think is going to be you
exactly.
know.
Now, I think that a lot of people get the wrong idea about equipment in general. Allan, if you're a good cyclist and you're into it, you're going to have good equipment. Yep. I mean, that's just the other thing. But I remember one time I was down at the Nantahala Outdoor Center where Payson Kennedy teaches whitewater canoeing. And they were mentioning the fact that he didn't tell this story about himself, but somebody was bellyaching. They said, well, if I had a canoe like yours and a paddle like yours, I could do that. And so Kennedy went out and found an old beat up canoe that the keel had a wiggle in it.
Yep.
And he got himself a garden spade. And went down through those rapids with an old beat up canoe and a garden spade just to prove,
The equipment isn't everything.
There you go.
If
Exactly.
you're good at what you do in a pro, you're going to have good stuff.
Yep.
That just comes
Mhm.
with it. But
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
small edge of it.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Your bike is
edge of it.
titanium.
The frame was
Yeah.
titanium. We also used the opportunity to prototype a bunch of the parts
Okay.
in much more lightweight material. So it's not
Right.
necessarily like, I don't think you could buy the whole bike like off the shelf,
Right.
but it's also a cool opportunity for us to prototype things, see
Yeah.
that they work really well, and then
Gotcha.
have the opportunity to potentially put them into full production.
Yeah.
So it's a titanium frame, and then we switched out the rack that's on the front.
Right.
We switched for carbon
Carbon,
fiber front rack.
Gotcha.
And then we use lightweight webbing as opposed to normally they use this like kind of dense webbing, which
Right.
actually adds quite a lot of weight, especially if it rains and then all that material grabs
Gets
the moisture.
water. Yep.
And what was the weight of
and-
your bike?
Yeah, it was a little less than 16 kilos
That's
as
great.
a full build.
Wow.
And the thing is,
That's not bad.
in a regular, in my mind, it was like, it's kind of like it's only a little bit heavier than a mid-range mountain
Oh,
bike.
yeah,
you
Right.
know? And I think the other thing is that we could have gotten it lighter,
Mhm.
but I had 2.4-inch tires on the front and
Right.
the back. So like each tire weighed pretty much a kilo, you know?
Right.
So if I was to do a different race on it that was more of a road race, then I think we could shave off at least another 2 kilos
Yeah.
on it. And depending on what you want to pack as well.
Got
But
it.
in the end, it was a very nice spec.
Yeah.
It was a very nice spec. It was.
Now, did
and
you gear
The
it? Did you
other
gear
side
it
of that
for?
issue is
did you
what's
ge-
going to let you down
Yeah.
out there in the middle of nowhere.
There you go.
Exactly.
Did you gear it for a lot of climbing, or how?
Yeah.
I think it's a 1x, isn't it? A 1x12.
Well, how about this? It's a 1x,
Yeah.
but it's not a 1x because
Okay.
I used the classified system, which I don't know if you guys have heard about. It's a newer company based out of Belgium,
Okay.
but they're very much entering very hard on the pro cycling scene. And
Okay.
I think they're currently a sponsor of Jumbo Visma.
Okay.
And they approached us to ask if we would like to give it a go because they were interested in like the mountain bike market and the cargo bike market and the bike packing market. And we were like,
Mhm.
oh, we're all three of those.
Mhm.
So what it is that it's an internal rear hub,
Okay.
which allows you to switch between two speeds.
Okay.
So you have
Gotcha.
a cassette on the back, you have a single chainring on the front, and then you have a little electronic shifter on the handlebars, and you can switch between two different speeds.
Gotcha. Okay.
And what it means is, especially for a race like Silk Road, it just means you have less external exposure to the elements and
Definitely.
the
Yep.
craziness. And it worked really well. What's interesting is that it is battery operated,
Yep.
and I brought the bloody charger kit. I'm not an electronic shifty.
Oh.
Chargers for my bike
Yep.
was kind of funny. But I completed the race in 12 days, and I didn't need to recharge in 12 days.
Amazing.
In
Great.
1,800 kilometers. And I didn't the funny thing is when you get these systems and they say it's good for 10,000 shifts or whatever,
Yep.
but if you've never used electric before, like how do you know how often you shift? So it was a bit of a experiment for us to see like
Yep.
how long does it hold up on it. And it's very nice for them as a company because it's like if you're not going to charge it in 1,800 kilometers,
Yep.
and that's going to be fine for the vast majorities of users of this bike.
There you go. Yep.
Or this system, excuse me. But
Excellent.
yeah, so I did have a very generous.
Great.
Question.
Mhm.
What next?
Great question. It's an interesting time of year because it's definitely the time of year where you start thinking, you try and sort of lay out your calendar for next year. I have a bunch of ideas and things that are in motion, potentially semi-confirmed, but I have like two big themes. One theme is that I want to race all of my races next year in pairs because I've never raced in a pair before. I've only ever raced solo. But I've had the great joy of meeting loads of other really friendly and wonderful and interesting people through the UltraCycling community.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have a go at racing with another experienced ultra distance racer and just to have the experience of the interaction with another person and get to know each other's ways and things like this. I'm going to try and race all my races next year in a pair just to see how that is, and a different pair each time. So it's a sort of unique experience. And then the other side is that I want to go predominantly to places I've never been before because I really like it's really great to be part of like a community, feeling like a community. It's a tight knit group, but I also want this experience to like broaden my horizons. And what's cool about ultra, and also with your introduction, is that there's races that happen in all over the world, you know, and it's kind of a cool opportunity to get to know another part of the world. So the ones I have on my radar are the Japan Odyssey that you mentioned before. I would really like to do Rhino Run, depending on their dates. Rhino Run is across South Africa and Namibia. And the possibility of doing across Andes in Chile at the end of the year. Yeah. So I recognize that it's ambitious to do more than 2 ultras in a year, never mind ones that are extremely far away. But I think I'm going to make it work.
Awesome.
I'm a make it work kind of guy.
There you go. Definitely.
Stay in touch with us, Alan.
Yes. We'd love to follow those.
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep us informed of what you're up to.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would love to.
Been a great show.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
Glad we.
Thanks so much for having me.
I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about that kind of experience that I didn't know about, you know?
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Jerry Brick. You can always depend on him, can't you?
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
We had a lot of watchers, but nobody commenting. So
yeah.
We're just going to go right to our
watching, but they're not talking to us.
There you go.
They're
Definitely.
shy. That's okay.
Yeah, they're shy.
There you go. Definitely.
They're tired after all this weekend.
There you go.
That I can understand.
Thank you a lot, Alan. I think it's time for us to go find Greg.
All right, here we go.
Ciao, ciao.
This is Gregory Zuber, thanking you for watching and sharing.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.